Good evening and welcome to Thursdays with NAMI. My name is Peg Morrison and I will be your host. I'm the Director of Programs for the National Alliance on Mental Illness of North Carolina. Thursdays with NAMI is our way of pushing back and injecting some positive energy into this era of COVID-19. We can't go out the way we used to, but we can take the time to create safe spaces, focus on wellness, and put an extra tool in our toolbox. That's why tonight's theme is Psychiatric Advance Directives, otherwise known as PADs. PADs are documents that allow us to take control of our mental health care by stating in advance when we're feeling well, what works for us and what does not. But more on that later. I'm thrilled to introduce our guest tonight, my friend and colleague, Ashish George. And he's going to be joining us by video in just a moment. Welcome. And you are muted right now, but we are going to fix that very promptly. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Hey, Peg, how are you?
I'm great. All right, there we go. So I'm going to read your bio here because it's pretty awesome. Ashish is NAMI North Carolina's Director of Public Policy and our PAD specialist, or guru as I like to call him. He was born in southern India and grew up in Greensboro. Prior to joining NAMI-NC, Ashish worked at a tiger reserve in India, a tiger reserve. How cool is that? OMG. There he was doing community relations. He also has worked at Davidson College where he did inclusion work. He was drawn to join us here at NAMI-NC because of the opportunity to highlight the connection between structural changes and better individual health outcomes. That is what we do. In his spare time, he likes to read, watch movies, and pet dogs. That certainly recommends you to me, right? So, all right, before we move into our program, I'm going to go with a word from our sponsors. And I'm going to pull up the division logo, which is right here. All right, beautiful. Funding for Thursdays with NAMI is provided in part by the North Carolina Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Abuse Services through the Federal Community Mental Health Services Block Grant Fund. This grant comes from SAMHSA, also known as the U.S. Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. The division truly has been a steady hand since COVID-19 jumped into the spotlight earlier this year. We're grateful for their guidance and their support. Thursdays with NAMI will be recorded, so if you have friends who couldn't join us tonight, please let them know there's still time. They can check out the recording on YouTube. It will be there within a few days. Just Google NAMI-NC, YouTube, Thursdays with NAMI, and you'll be right there. All right, let me get back to our normal screen. There we go. Moving right along. Sometimes we get questions submitted in advance of the show. And something unusual arrived today, so I'm going to start with that. Some of you know we have an office mascot named Roxy. She's our therapy beagle. And she was curious enough about PADs that she took the time to write us a letter. Now that's pretty cool. So she wanted to be here with us. She's a very busy gal. She's luckily going to be calling in and doing some video chatting later. But she's pretty tied up, generally speaking. I might as well pull up her photo while I read her letter. So let's go ahead and share that screen. Oh, there we go. Oh, there's Rexy. No, that's the wrong pet. Okay. There's Roxy. There's my girl. And you can find her in the office usually 5 days a week. Okay. So she writes, "Dear Ashish, my name is Roxy Morrison, and I am a 12-year-old Beagle American. Everyone says you are the best person to help us plan for the long road ahead. I've heard that you are the top expert on PAWS."
PADs, not PAWS. I'm not a veterinarian, Roxy.
Oh my goodness, okay. I think we've got a little bit of confusion there. Yeah, I didn't mean to confuse you, Miss Roxy, but actually she just happened to call. Excellent timing on her part. So let me unshare this still photo. And here's Roxy in person. How do you feel about this, Roxy? Are you interested in learning about PADS? Yeah, that's a clear yes. Okay. Sometimes she's a little bit coy. Don't worry about that. All right, excellent. So I think Roxy and our virtual studio audience is very interested in learning about PADS, Psychiatric Advance Directives. It's certainly something I would like to learn more about, and I think it's something that everyone should know about. So with that, I'll leave it to Ashish to take it away.
Great. Thanks, Peg. So I just started at NAMI in mid-January, and I've been getting my feet on the ground, so to speak, talking about PADS with various people. So I'll try to be as thorough as I can, but if there are questions, we can get to those as well. So PAD, as you know, stands for Psychiatric Advance Directives. And just like medical directives that to make plans for your medical care in the future at a point where you're not able to make decisions for yourself, psychiatric advance directives to allow you to make plans for your psychiatric care. The difference between the two, the primary difference, is that medical advance directives address situations you haven't been in before. So for example, if you're worried about what might happen if, God forbid, you're in a car accident and you're unable to address the doctors and tell them what you want to do if you're in a persistent vegetative state or something like that, that's a situation you haven't been in already. Whereas with psychiatric advance directives, what you can do is draw upon your personal experience with mental illness or the experiences of your loved ones, if you think it runs in your family or your friends have exhibited signs as well, and extrapolate. In other words, project into the future how you think you might want to be treated. So that'll be a decision that you'll take into account, like I said, based on previous experiences you've had and your current state, so what you might want. A couple of notes about that, though. So if you make a psychiatric advance directive, if you make plans for how you want your care to go, there will be times when that can be overridden by circumstances around you. So if you're involuntarily committed, that's a situation in which the psychiatric advance directive will not be followed, because in that situation, you've been placed in medical care for reasons that are legally binding. Another way that a PAD might not be as thorough as perhaps they can seem initially is if you are violating standards of care. So if you ask doctors to violate the Hippocratic Oath, for example, that might be the easiest example. That'll obviously go against their standards of care. So that'll be a situation in which you can't plan ahead in a way that would make doctors forced to violate community standards of care or professional ethics. So PADS developed in the 90s following a court case in Missouri called Cruzon versus Missouri. And I drew the comparison a few moments ago between psychiatric advance directives and medical advance directives. And in this case, a woman was in a car accident and she was not able to be removed from medical care. In other words, she was being kept alive by technology, medical technology at the time. And there was no way for her to express any wishes that she didn't want that to continue, and her family couldn't do that either. So in the wake of that, psychiatric advance directives sprang up in the 90s so that people could more generally plan for their medical care. And federally funded facilities were required to take that into account. So PADS are relatively new, and yet at the same time, the intuition is kind of common sense, right? Like, you want to be able to plan ahead in a way that medical professionals can respect. And at the same time, these can vary state by state. So the information I'll be presenting today is specific to North Carolina. And if you travel to South Carolina and took up residence there, the psychiatric advance directive you grew up in North Carolina would not necessarily be valid. Roxy, are you following along with this?
Let me pull her up here. Are you following along?
Oh, she's an attentive dog. Good, I'm glad.
Doing her best there, okay. Thanks
So
for
there are
staying
two
on the
parts.
line.
What'd you say, Peg?
I said, thanks for staying on the line, Roxy.
Yeah. So there are two parts of a PAD, basically. There's the Advance Directive and there's the healthcare power of attorney. So the Advance Directive has to do with the care that you're undergoing. So that has to do with potential treatments, how you want the doctors to approach what you're going through, and the facilities and perhaps in which you'd like to be placed. So that has to do specifically with care, specifically as you can tell by the title. Whereas the healthcare power of attorney is who you want to be in charge of making sure that these decisions are followed through on. And you can fill out both parts of this PAD, or you can fill out one. So in other words, you can fill out the Advance Directive that has to do with the care aspect of how you're going to be treated, the medications, the facilities, the long-term or short-term treatments, or you could fill out the power of attorney without filling out the Advance Care Directive, and that would just entrust you more into the care of someone who was, a close person to someone close to you, a loved one or a family member or a friend. Guardianship, interestingly, is a complication. You might think that if you're under the care of a guardian, that would that would complement a PAD, but in the case of guardianship, it's often the case that you're not able to produce a PAD because the guardian is the one who has control over the care you're going to receive. So another way to think about it is a guardian is the person who's already guiding you. And so if you would like to fill out a PAD, you'd have to somehow overrule their guidance. But the nature of guardianship is such that you can't overrule the decisions they would like to make. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So, when we talk about PADs, one thing we want to really remember is that there's often an adversarial relationship between psychiatrists and patients. So there can be a lot of push and pull. Some people want medications more than their doctors, vice versa. The doctors want to medicate patients more than the patients want to be medicated. And that can be a very unfortunate consequence of having to navigate the healthcare system if you have a mental illness. So the PAD is a way to address that. And hopefully you don't start out with an adversarial relationship with a psychiatrist to begin with, but if you feel like there's a situation in which you've had negative experiences before with medical professionals, or not even negative experiences, but just complicated experiences, a PAD is a way to circumvent that problem and hopefully get the care you need without having to worry about what kind of psychiatrist you're going to encounter down the road at a point when you're not in a position to have decision-making capability. It can also help you clarify your own preferences. So some of you listening right now might be wondering, well, what are my own preferences for how I want to be treated? It's not always obvious. Sometimes it requires research, sometimes it requires consultation with the people in your life, including the medical professionals, friends, and loved ones around you. So if you're thinking about creating a PAD, it can also just force you to, or not force you, that's the wrong word, but it can also spur you to reflect on what you want from your advanced care, from your treatment in the future. And it's not, like I said, it's not always obvious because there are many different facilities, many different medications, many different types of treatment you can receive. Unless you're already in the medical field, chances are that a Wikipedia search is not going to be enough to help you sort that out. So that's another advantage of a PAD. In addition to clarifying your relationship with the medical professionals, it clarifies your relationship to yourself. And to quote Hamlet, "To thine own self be true," is a good maxim for navigating healthcare as well as life in general. So psychiatric advance directives represent an opportunity for healthcare systems to respond to how people want to be treated. So 27 states have instructional PAD statutes. So it's not a nationwide thing quite yet. Like I said, this was something that sprung up in the 90s in response to medical care directives, or I should say in parallel with medical care directives that have to do with physical treatment. So in addition to, but North Carolina is one of the states that has statutory advisory policies on how to fill out a PAD. And in a few minutes, I'll get to the actual parts of a pad so we can talk about that, because I'm sure you're wondering about that. And I'm sure you're also wondering about how COVID-19 is affecting pad treatment. So one thing that you have to do if you fill out a pad is to get it notarized. And you might think, well, in an age of social distancing, how can you do that? Well, B.B. Smith, who works for an allied organization, she's a wonderful social worker with a long career of experience in mental health care. She pointed out that you can do this actually right now at a bank. So if you go through the drive-through of a bank, you can get your Psychiatric Advance Directive notarized. And this allows you to avoid the problem of worrying, where am I going to find a notary that's available? Most people at some point during this lockdown will have to go to a bank or a drive-through, a bank drive-through. So you can get it done there. It's a formal document and one that will be recognized, hopefully, when you fill this out very carefully. Research has shown, it's not just a subjective preference, research has shown that people who do fill out a PAD experience improved relationships with their healthcare professionals. So the fact that you're worrying about PAD treatment psychiatric treatment, because your past experiences have been negative or complicated, is not a reason not to fill out a PAD or to dread how you might be treated in the future. It's actually a good reason to fill out the PAD right now, because it can help you soften the always stressful experience of entering healthcare facilities, either in a healthy state or a not so healthy state. And so when we talk about PADs, we're also talking about how do you get people to see that a PAD has been created? Well, when you find that you want to get them into electronic healthcare records that can be shared across systems. So once you've filled out a PAD, once you've had it notarized, a key thing to do is to talk to someone about putting that into an electronic healthcare system. And oftentimes hospitals will be struggling to share information across systems. If you've ever moved across the country or moved to another state or even another city, you probably realize there's no single medical record of all your experiences. This has helped people for sure to be able to transmit information between healthcare systems when you have it in an electronic healthcare record. And you'll need witnesses in front of the notary, so that'll be something that you can take up with your loved ones or a friend, and so that'll help people as well to see that you filled out the PAD and you fulfilled all the legal obligations that go with it. So you have these two records that you can count on: the electronic healthcare records, which will hopefully, and I think you should insist on this after you filled out the PAD. It'll disseminate the information correctly so that you're not stuck with just one doctor or one facility that's aware of your PAD. And also the fact that you have witnesses present, people who can legally testify in the PAD document that you've helped with that you've filled out this form. So another great thing about PADs is that when you fill them out, you're able to give doctors a sense of what the practical needs are that you have. So not everyone's needs are the same. Schizophrenia, for example, is not the same in every single person. So if your experience with it is quite different from the experiences of other people that doctors are going to encounter, then that's a reason to be very, very, very detailed in terms of what you've experienced before, how you haven't responded well to something, or how you have responded well to something. So try to be as specific as possible when you fill out a PAD about your medical history, even when it's difficult, and even when you feel like you have to go through your memory and revisit some very painful episodes. It's worth it, because that'll help you have fewer painful episodes in the future at a time when you're really struggling.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point. I mean, for me, even when they ask, list your prescription medicines here, I'll always groan and I think, but But it's worth it to revisit those things to get it right and get it on the record. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think that doctors appreciate that too. So the fact that you are willing to share that information makes their job easier. So suppose you're, God forbid again, but suppose you're in a state now where you have to be committed into a facility, and you're, I mean, not involuntarily committed, but you have to be in a facility, and you have filled out a pad. Well, in a situation like now where you have doctors so focused on COVID-19, and even being in a hospital or being in any kind of public facility is itself a source of danger, you want to have the process streamlined. You want to spend as little time doing inefficient things as possible, because it can be the difference between healthy outcomes, not just mental health, but physical health as well. It can be the difference between a good health outcome and a negative one. And I think that's really important, because no one wants to spend more time than they have to in a psychiatric facility or any medical facility for that matter. So a PAD is really useful for minimizing the amount of time that you have to spend dealing with the healthcare system. So I'd like to now take some time to go through the actual parts of a PAD. This is all available online. If you go to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, they have forms specific to North Carolina. Once again, that's the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. We'll share that information at the end. But I think what's really important is that we go through the different parts of the PAD and talk about how you can go about filling one out. And the forms, by the way, are also online. The first thing we need to remember is we're filling out one that's specific to North Carolina. I said that before, but I want to highlight that again. There's no nationwide Psychiatric Advance Directive. So if you have a loved one moving in from another state and they filled in a PAD, they need to fill in a different one for North Carolina. Vice versa, if you're moving to another state, please fill one out for the other state if they have legally recognized PADs. So you'll have the certification of the notary public. You'll have the witnesses attesting that they're present. And then they'll ask you for information like county and the date and so on. Pretty self-explanatory. But what's a little more complicated perhaps is when you try to fill out the PAD, they're going to ask you for things like, they're going to ask you about your psychoactive medications. So if you have a history of treatment, please list, what you've been through and how you've responded to treatment. So again, it's good to be as specific as possible. And you can consent to the administration of medication or not. There's a spot in the PAD where you can check one of those boxes and say, I consent to the following medications. I do not consent to the following medications. Be as specific as you want. Again, consult with perhaps your doctor. So even if you haven't undergone a certain sort of psychiatric treatment before, like if you haven't been on a certain medication before, but you have heard that people with your condition in later states of life sometimes are treated with that medication, you can say that you don't want to be treated with that medication or that you do, depending on the research you conduct, which will be your decision, your personal choice. And again, that helps because if you're unaware of what kind of medications your body will react well to or won't, that'll cause you to perhaps think about that, do some research, compare and contrast your previous experiences. And you can also consent to being admitted for healthcare treatment or not being admitted to a facility. You can also list limitations for how long. So you can say that you don't want to be retained in the facility for more than 10 days. And this will help you, also regulate in the future how much time you spend going through the facilities that will sometimes be the ones giving you treatment. And they ask specifically, these are things I mentioned before, but they ask specifically, how do you react to being hospitalized? So, no one likes being constrained. It's very stressful. No one likes being in a facility where you're told what to do. Your food options are limited. Doctors are coming and going. So you can describe in detail how you react on the form. You can describe how you react to being in a facility, to being in a hospital. And that, of course, would be important for doctors to know and loved ones to know. And you can tell staff of the staff of the hospital or crisis unit what they can do to help you. So if, for example, you do particularly well in hospital settings when people check in on you, you have someone to talk to, that's something you can note. If you don't do well in a hospital setting when people are, in your opinion, bothering you, checking in on you too often, you can note that they should only check in on you as often as medically necessary or something like that. And this way, we can make your stay at the hospital as comfortable as possible. And there are also, references you can make for more intense forms of treatment. So ECT is a term you might hear when you fill out a pad. It's
electroconvulsive therapy.
Electroconvulsive therapy, very good. And it's a form of therapy that's often associated with, past decades, the 60s or 70s. You see it often in movies, but it's also a contemporary form of treatment. So some psychiatrists will suggest electroconvulsive therapy even now, and they perhaps will have good reasons for doing that. But on the Psychiatric Advance Directive, you can say how you respond to something like that, how you respond to various medications. Because ECT is a pretty intense form of treatment. I mean, obviously psychiatrists and medical professionals wouldn't prescribe it for people unless they saw some benefit. But again, you don't have to consent to treatment if you don't want to on the pad. So you can make a note about ECT and let the people around you know how you feel about something like that. And so when we fill out these forms, it's probably best not to do it alone. I mean, it's always a good idea, I think, to do it in consultation with people who know, how you might respond. So ECT might be something that you haven't experienced personally. And again, a Wikipedia search or a Google search is not going to be enough to tell you how you would respond to it or how other people have responded to it, because there's a lot of valuable information on the internet and there's a lot of information that can misguide you. So talk to your medical professionals before you fill out a pad. If you feel like information like ECT, treatments like ECT are something you're not well informed about. And so when you fill out a pad, you can think about treatment options like that. You can also think about the witnesses you want to be there. This is a very personal matter. So you're probably not going to pick people you barely know to be witnesses. But hopefully the witnesses can be people who make you feel supported and affirmed in your choices.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
If I'm going through that bank drive-through, do I have witnesses in my car with me? Is that why the notarization is possible?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right. And so, when you have the witnesses in your car, that's completely fine. You don't need to. It's not like they need to violate any social distancing rules or anything like that. And that's why a drive-through is super convenient. You can do it at the State Employees Credit Union. That's where BB Smith, the person I mentioned earlier, who's one of our allies at another organization, she got her pad filled out at the State Employees Credit Union drive-through. So that's just one example. I'm sure other banks would have something similar and be willing to accommodate you. And so Roxy, how's Roxy doing? Let's check in on her.
I think she's looking pretty attentive here yet. How you doing there, Roxy? Yeah, I think she's all ears.
All ears, indeed. My favorite Beagle American.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, we'll have some questions at the end, but for now, I'm going to turn it back to Peg. And after Peg talks a little bit more, I'll be happy to address some questions that have been raised to us before tonight's talk.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ashish. It's a fascinating area, and it's sort of a blend of social work and legal work and a lot of detail. Actually, I want to loop back too, because I had intended to ask you some initial questions just about how you're coping and what things have been like for you with COVID-19. I can't imagine starting a new job and almost immediately going remote and all this isolation, and you haven't lived here that long.
Yeah, so I'm from Greensboro, about an hour and a half away. So I'm fortunate that, Raleigh is not unfamiliar to me, really. The other half of my job is public policy. I'm the director of public policy, along with being the Psychiatric Advance Directive specialist for NAMI, North Carolina. So, my job would involve a lot of work on Jones Street, lobbying on behalf of mental health goals, trying to expand mental health services. And even now, we're trying to do a lot of that work by keeping in touch with keeping in touch with how changes have been made to various policies. Um, and it's really interesting to me to see how people are responding with telehealth and Zoom conferences. Peg, you've been doing a great job with these. Um, and, I think it's great that people are adapting so well. I think a lot of people are realizing that being isolated at home is very demoralizing oftentimes, but that if we reach out to people, they'll reach back, which is precisely what NAMI North Carolina is striving to do, is reach back and reach out to people.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and I always like to ask people this question. Is there a period of your life or is there an era of history that this COVID-19 pandemic reminds you of?
Yeah, I would say, um, in terms of how isolating it can feel, it can remind me a little bit of, the years immediately after 9/11, when, everything was kind of in flux. I was in high school when 9/11 happened, and it was a shock. It was like, how could something like this happen? And I'm sure for a lot of people, they're having the same thought, like, how could something like this happen? Even after you read all the articles about the biology and the transmission and the doctor's work and the process of treating people, it still doesn't quite seem real. And, it's kind of a bolt from the blue for a lot of people, in kind of the same way I think 9/11 was for people. Um, and the economic shock is really affecting people as well. So, it's really a good opportunity, I think. I mean, not a good opportunity, but an opportunity to reach out to people you haven't heard from in a while. I'm definitely making an effort to text and call and Zoom with people who I otherwise haven't heard from often, or infrequently. And that is really, a function of the resilience that people can exhibit when they're under stress. They, think about what resources they have in their own lives, in their own past. And that can be a source of strength when you think, oh, I have more available to me than I initially realized. I'm not as alone as I initially realized. And I think that when you do that, you often find people who are willing and able to find some sort of connection, find some sort of intimacy, even in a tragedy like this.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, it is definitely a difficult time. So now I'll ask Roxy, since she's still on the line here with us. Roxy, what do you think of all this with COVID-19 and how are you coping? Okay, sometimes we just want to put our head in the pillow, don't we? Okay. Well, I think she's done with her feedback for us tonight. We do have some questions I see in the chat box, and let's see, we've got quite a few. I might as well move up and start with the first ones. When the pad has been completed, where should it be kept on file? With an attorney or a family member? So I'm thinking we lost Ashish. And that is an excellent question. While he is finding his way back to us, which I'm sure he's attempting to do, I will see if I can't. No. see if I can find my way back to the internet and show us. Okay, so this is the website that he wanted me to have on standby for you. If someone could tell me in perhaps Q&A if you can see the website that I'm pulling up for you. Someone could just put in the question and answer box for me. Yes, thank you, Diane K. Very, very helpful. So this is a nonprofit, a National Resource Center on Psychiatric Advance Directives. And these are the forms for this particular state. They have every state available. They have every state available at this website. North Carolina's statutory form for advanced instruction for mental health treatment, the power of attorney, advance directive, a lot of different options here. So why don't we look at this, the most basic one. And so these are available to print out and fill out. You've got your principal name, that would be the patient, me, the person who's seeking treatment. And it asks you to walk through what things look like when you hit a period of extreme distress. So what are some symptoms I might experience during a period of crisis? I'll say for myself, I definitely isolate, and I find my inner critic towards myself and others is much more intense. I'm edgy with myself and other people. I just don't have any patience at all. I agree to administration of the following medications. Now, I know from my mother, she was given Valium when she sought treatment. It was a long time ago, it was in the 70s, and she could not function and raise 6 kids when she was on Valium. So she went without treatment, unfortunately.
By the way, I'm back, Peg. I was disconnected from the internet, sorry.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was just walking through the form that you directed me to have on standby. I do not agree to some medication. So these are all the things that Ashish discussed. And I want to go ahead and point out it's nrc-pad.org, nrc-pad.org. That's where you can find that. And I think I will go ahead and copy that, and then I can put it in the chat box.
Great.
Yeah, so there were questions about where you file the pad, with an attorney, with a family member.
Well, a family member would not have any legal authority. So you're going to fill it out and give it to the attorney and the medical professionals who can put it into an electronic healthcare system record. So if a family member has it, I mean, that you could do that, but I mean, I think the most reliable way would probably be to give it to an attorney. That's what I would do. Or, give it to a doctor and make sure that he could put it into a healthcare system.
Right. Yeah, I would think those are definitely the best legal choices. If you're more comfortable giving it to that supportive family member, I could definitely see doing that just because you want to. And maybe there's someone who will always advocate for you when you feel like people are not listening. So as a matter of like comfort and confidence, I think that is a good idea. But the correct answer, as Ashish said, is the lawyer the lawyer. So, okay, that was the first question. So we've got questions in the chat box, and then we've got other questions in Q&A. I'm going to ask you to direct your questions to Q&A so that once I'm done with these chat box questions, I can just switch over. Is there a reason that this form is not accessible on the Secretary of State of NC's site, where power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, and advanced directive forms can be found?
I'm not sure if there's a reason why. There is a link which I'll share where you can download the form. So that's it. I think that I already mentioned it, but I'll link to it again. The SAMHSA link. And if you go there, you can definitely get the form you need. So I don't think it should be too much of a problem. And I will put that into the chat box as well in a moment.
Okay, so there's another question in the chat box. Oh, no, I think you covered those. So let's go to Q&A. We've got 8 questions here. Can you revisit the PADS versus involuntary commitment? So can you go over that again? So it sounds like the involuntary commitment trumps the PAD. Can a PAD be used for SUD treatment, or is it just psychiatric care? So can a PAD be used for SUD treatment, or is it just psychiatric care? I'm trying to recall what SUD means, if I ever knew. Are you there, Ashish? Womp womp.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. The question was, can you explain the difference between involuntary commitment and what a PAD can do, right?
Yeah, and can it be used for substance use disorder versus psychiatric?
Well, anything that would, make you not qualified to judge your own mental state would qualify as a situation in which your mental health is at stake. But as far as I know right now, it's primarily a biological function of, mental health, and so substance use, I don't think would qualify. Isn't that right, Peg?
That sounds right to me. It's not really my area of expertise.
Yeah, so involuntary commitment is a mental health form of commitment. And a substance use disorder commitment would be either a legal proceeding, which would make it involuntary, or it would be, a voluntary commitment of, health, like rehab. In a situation like that, you're not quite allowed to have a PAD come into force.
Yeah, Diane Crescenda, who's trained in this area, is saying you are correct. So we got that vote of confidence.
Yeah.
All right, so now, okay, a lot of people came to my rescue and said, yes, you could see the screen when I asked. Thank you for all those yes and questions in the box. How can an advance directive be overwritten? Interesting.
Overwritten, as in like
Right.
you write one and then you don't want to use it again? Like you want a different PAD? Is that what the question means?
No, it's written as overwritten, but I think maybe she means can you
Oh,
override it?
override. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just fill out another one, and the latest one I think would supersede the previous PAD. Also, one thing to note, I'm glad that question was asked. If you fill out a PAD and you are incapacitated in some way because of mental health issues, then you can't revoke your PAD while you're incapacitated. So you can't say while you're being committed, oh, no, I didn't mean that I wanted to be treated in this way. I would prefer to have X, Y, and Z handled differently than I have signed into my PAD. You can't revoke it until you're once again cognizant, or you're aware in a way that allows you to make decisions. So make it so that your PAD is make it so that your PAD is something that you think you won't want to subsequently revoke if you enter a mental health state where you're not able to make decisions for yourself. Because once you enter that state, once you're incapacitated, unable to make decisions for yourself, you can't revoke the decisions you already made in your PAD until you're back into a mental health state where the law recognizes you as fully aware and fully capable of making decisions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a note of reinforcement from Judy Jenkins here. She's on our board. Charles Ignaglia, Senior Vice President for Public Policy at National Council for Behavioral Health, has never heard of advanced directives being used for substance use disorders. So if he hasn't heard of it, I'm thinking it's not a thing.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense for it to be a thing, really.
Yeah, they are pretty different in this, in the case of a crisis. Okay, so if a family member, this one from Gary Kreitz, that name sounds familiar. If a family member takes you into the facility, can he or she override what a pad says?
No, not unless this person, I mean, no, because the pad is your personal preferences, your wish. It would be like, so a comparable question might be, could a family member override your medical directive? So if you say, I would like a certain sort of medical treatment, I would like to be taken off of a respirator if I'm in a condition where I can't make decisions for myself, and I'm being, my life is being sustained by medical technology. A family member who goes into the medical facility with you can't override that and keep you on the respirator if your wishes have been recorded as the opposite. So a family member who joins you, who helps you get into a medical facility or a treatment facility, can't override or contradict what's in your pad.
Okay, but if it turns out that family member is so concerned and feels that you're a threat to yourself or someone else and you end up being involuntarily committed, then the pad is out of effect for a
Right.
while, right?
Right,
Okay.
it's out of effect. Any
Yeah.
involuntary commitment always voids the power of a pad, because the treatment you might need is not something you had planned for. You were planning for a situation where other people weren't in some way restricting your freedom out of a sense of legal or moral obligation. They were instead restricting your freedom because of medical necessity. Let me put it that way. Yeah.
Okay. So that's a good clarification. I would hope the doctors would have a look at the pad either way. It seems like it would be good to know. Okay. So do you have to have a lawyer involved when you do a pad? That's from Hannah Carroll, one of our affiliate presidents. Hey, Hannah.
Hannah, how are you? I've been in touch with Hannah before. She's been very, very useful. Um, and so it turns out that it's not necessary to have an attorney, but it is necessary to have knowledge of a legal process. So, I mean, I suggested giving the pad to an attorney just out of practicality, but you don't have to. Like I said, you can give it to a family member or someone like that. But I would strongly recommend that you have an attorney um, who can help you with the legal details of it, just because it's not always intuitive and it's not always commonsensical. So, when you're making the decision, like I said, there are two parts of the pad. There's the advance directive, the sorts of care you want to receive, and then there's the healthcare agent who can make sure that your wishes are implemented. And those two come apart. You can decide on both, or you can decide on one. The attorney is not necessary, but highly recommended, just from the perspective of being able to cover all your bases. For the same reason, it's worthwhile to consult with a doctor before you fill out the pad as well, because then you know what the terminology is, what medications might be under consideration in your future treatment, etc. So recommended, but not required.
Okay. Now, how does the Secretary of State's office come into play? This is just me asking out of curiosity.
You can file the pad with the Secretary of State.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then it's official. It seems like that would be the case.
It should be official, right? So when you put in a pad, again, dissemination is an issue. So when it goes to the Secretary of State, you also want it to be simultaneously disseminated among the electronic healthcare records of various healthcare systems, like the ones you might go through.
Okay. Okay. So now I'm going to look at the chat box again. Comment. In my case, the pad would be for my son when he's an adult and I'm his guardian and something happens to me. So should I have two people lined up, power of attorney and a guardian? Maybe you could review what those mean.
Okay, so I'm not seeing this question, probably because I was disconnected very brief. Oh, here it is. Okay. So if you're not yet your son's guardian, and you're filling out a pad for your son, it seems like this is something different because you can't fill out a PAD for another person. A PAD is self-referential. It refers to the treatment that you're opting for. And if you're the guardian, then you can make the decisions about treatment. What instead would make sense is if you set up another guardian in case something were to happen to you, so that he or she could take care of your son's medical needs. But a PAD is something that you fill out, and guardianship actually voids it. So if you have a guardian, you can't fill out a PAD. And so what it seems like the better option would be for this person to think carefully about the next guardian they want to be in charge of their son's medical care or psychiatric care. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
I think it does. And she had clarified, although I don't mean in terms of my death, just a temporary issue, but it seems like that your comment would still apply.
Yeah.
Well, let us know, Suzanne, if you'd like more information on that point. And Diane is clarifying, Diane Crescenda, another of our affiliate presidents. Yes, that is correct. You heard that right from Elaine. It goes on the registry. So I think that was referring to the Secretary of State's office.
Yeah.
It's 7:51. Sometimes we go to 8:30 and sometimes we go until 8 at Thursdays with NAMI. If there are any other questions or comments or good jokes, we'd be happy to hear them. I guess one thing that comes to my mind is if I'm totally new to Psychiatric Advance Directives, what's my first step? Is it going to a website and printing something off?
Yeah, I mean, so I think we've included the link to the actual form itself above, right? Taking that form and consulting with loved ones, doctors, and an attorney subsequently, and that would definitely help, I think. So, you want to think about your own medical history. You want to think about your potential medical history. You want to do some research into various facilities, the types of facilities you might find yourself in, and the types of treatment you might undergo. So a lot of it involves research in conjunction with thinking about who the people in your life are that you can count on for advice about filling out this PAD. Obviously, no one wants to be a burden, but at the same time, we want to advocate for ourselves and make sure that the people we value are taking care of us as well. So I would think that this is a collaborative process. I know it can sound like just something you do to make sure that you're okay, but it's not a completely individualistic process by any means. It's something you do with other people. Also, breaking news, Nicole Karam, who used to work at NAMI, North Carolina, and now works for another allied organization, she notes that the House COVID bill is setting up a virtual notary process.
Oh, nice.
So I mentioned that you would have notary options at a bank. You also have a virtual notary option. This is in legislation that's pending, so it's something to keep track of. NC Health News, that's a good website to keep track of things like this. But this is something that will change in the next hopefully in the upcoming weeks. It's in the House COVID package. No guarantees, of course, because the legislature is very preoccupied. I'm not sure in my conversations in my conversations with legislators, I've not been absolutely clear how much they're going to pick up it doesn't directly relate to COVID relief. So, but this is a bill that's under consideration. And this bill is also considering waiving the requirement of 2 witnesses. So this is breaking news. You're hearing it here first. A House bill that's pending, again, pending. I want to emphasize that. So it's not in the books yet, but a House bill that's pending is thinking about, it will, if it's passed, waive the requirement of 2 witnesses and make the notary process virtual.
That's right. Remember, you heard it here. Thursdays with NAMI. You heard it here first. All right. Any other questions? I just realized I got so jazzed about PADS and having Roxy on the line. Oops, we've got another question. I forgot our video of the week, so we're going to get to that before we close. Does a guardian have the same authority to authorize things outlined in a PAD? Does a guardian have the same authority to authorize things that are outlined in a PAD?
I'm not absolutely sure. I am not an expert on guardianship. That's a separate issue. Um, but I think the best thing to do would be to consult with your the doctor of the person you're the guardian of. Um, I would imagine that some of it is applicable, like how this person responds to treatment is something you could definitely record. But PAD is a form that's, and the details of a PAD are a form that a person fills out for themselves. Um, and the details of the PAD itself, as we've been over tonight, refer back to the person's own medical history. So I think that if you were a guardian, you would have to have the same information and try to convey that to a representative of the medical facility or healthcare provider. So I can't say for sure off the top of my head, though, if guardianship involves all the same details that you could fill out in a PAD.
Yeah, there's a lot to know here. It's a lot. It's complex and it's important. So I'm really glad that we could get a handle on this information, just sort of get the lay of the land with it. And in the future, we're working to figure out how to do this virtually. We'd like to do some PADS completion workshops. So that would kind of be a next step workshop. And we'll stay tuned for that information. But if there are no more questions, then we will go ahead and watch our video of the week. Real quick update from the chat box. The county clerk of courts would be able to answer this. Okay, so let's do our awesome video of the week. I now, full disclosure, I was trying to do videos earlier and I was having quite a hard time, but I'm gonna have faith that this one will work. All right. Oh, wait. Let me try this one more time. I know I forgot to hit a button, so thank you for bearing with me. I know. I know. I feel like we're testing your patience tonight, but you've been a beautiful audience, and I appreciate you so much. Here we go. We're going to do this one more time, and I have such a good feeling about it. So how do you take a break from virtual walking? This is Roxy Morrison demonstrating her thoughts on the topic. Her neighbor Charlie is nearby to help. It's always important to have a supporter on hand when you walk and or take a break. And I think they're done. All right, so that was our awesome video of the week. Please tell me you heard it and saw it.
Heard it. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna have two really good videos of the week next time. Diane saw it apparently. Anyways, I don't want to beat a dead horse. There's one more question here. What do we got? It's just sound. All right, thank you for that note. Yeah, I think we're gonna wrap up. It seems like it's not my day technology wise, but really,
No, Peg, you did a great job. Don't sell yourself short.
I really appreciate everyone being here tonight. As always, our time together has really flown by, and I'm grateful that you're here. Remember, whatever it takes to be safe, go where you need to go, do what you need to do. And remember, NAMI North Carolina is with you, thinking about you. Until next week, we're going to have Marta Jackson, a therapist, my therapist, as fate would have it, talking about mindfulness and self-care. She's very lovely and effective. The following week, May 7th, we've got Cody Kinsley from the Department of Health and Human Services. He's kind of a big deal. And I really appreciate, again, everyone being here. And have a wonderful night. I think with that, we'll close.
Thank you, Peg.
Have a good night. Thanks, Ashish. Great job.